Hello, Com 1310 students. Thank you for joining me for this recording. As you have all observed in our class, we have a problem. There has been multiple times, too many times, where the number 6 and the number 7 have been mentioned way too close to each other in a sentence, and then the reaction we got from the class was unsettling, to the point where we have had to admit that we have a substantial amount of brain rot going on. So, in order to accommodate you, I'm going to play Minecraft while teaching you about enhancing interpersonal relationships and managing conflict. This is a very important unit on PUGSS, and we are going to talk about some important concepts that are going to be useful for you both in applying to your personal life but also in your quiz specifically. And then I'm going to provide you with a 5-point extra credit opportunity and give you a supplementary assignment for you to submit that will give you those 5 points and also count for your attendance. I apologize also, as we're going through this, my voice is going to go in and out and I might cough a little bit. I'm not feeling well today, hence the video. So we'll see how this goes. Never done this before, so just bear with me. I'll probably get through the bulk of the content in the first 20-30 minutes max. Then I will tell you, hey, you can go ahead and sign off, and then you can stay longer if you want to hear some bonus content I'm going to share with you, but otherwise you'll be free to go. So let's load into my Com 1310 world right here. It's a brand new world that I created earlier. Very epic. Alright, I'm going to be pausing to come over here every once in a while, but we're going to be focused primarily on the content. Alright, so Chapter 8 of the Guidebook Extras, Enhancing Interpersonal Relationships and Managing Conflict. So, first of all, understanding conflict is important because it is one of the things that all relationships have in common. You are not going to be able to have any meaningful relationship, whether that's friendships or romantic relationships or family relationships, without conflict. It is a inevitable part of any interpersonal relationship. And as the textbook talks about, as relationships become more intimate, the probability of interpersonal conflict increases, which means the closer you get to somebody, the more conflict you are going to have, which is why you go to marriage counseling before you get married, because you are usually not any closer to somebody in your life than the person you are married to. So, it's important to keep in mind as well. Let's turn this audio down just a little bit, even though that music is pretty amazing. So, this is the kind of definition from the textbook. You have that conflict is an expressed struggle that occurs between at least two people. So, what does expressed struggle means? That means it is a difficult dynamic that's happening in the relationship, or a kind of talking point that is actually being brought up. If something is being suppressed or it's not being talked about because it's too painful or too awkward or something like that, then it's not an expressed struggle, and conflict usually will not happen, at least not about the thing that's not being expressed. Excuse me. So, it's a expressed struggle that occurs between at least two people who are interdependent. That means they are reliant on one another for something. So that could be in a marriage relationship, for example. You are kind of reliant on each other for emotional support and a sense of identity, and it could also be as simple as the relationship between you eating at a restaurant and your waiter or waitress, because you are relying on them to give you good service and to bring you your food, and they're relying on you to not make their shift at work terrible and hopefully to get a good tip as well. So there can be conflict in those interpersonal relationships because there is some level of interdependent reliance on one another. So these people who are having conflict perceive incompatible goals, scarce resources, or experience a climate of competition with the other person. This, of course, means that there are things that both people want that they both can't have, so there is a type of battle between incompatible goals. This could be something as obvious as having conflict with somebody because you're both applying to the same job and only one of you can have it, or having conflict with somebody because they want more of your time and you want to give your time to something else. So for example, if your boyfriend or girlfriend wants more time with you and they don't feel like you're prioritizing them, and then you feel like you're giving them plenty of time and you need to go to the gym, or you want to play games, or you want to hang out with your friends, there is a incompatible goal and a scarce resource of your time, essentially. And then of course competition as well. So when these things are at play between two people, this is where conflict kind of emerges. So there are a couple of different types of conflict management styles. You have non-confrontational styles, which use indirect strategies, such as avoiding and withdrawing. You can see in the picture up there, there is the woman who seems to be frustrated because her husband is kind of disengaging. That's called stonewalling. It means that they are feeling overwhelmed in the conversation and are unable to actually engage in a meaningful way with what's going on in this dialogue. And then you have people typically rely on withdrawing or avoiding the conversations because it makes them nervous, or it makes them reluctant and scared. This could involve strategies of silence or kind of suppressing or concealing feelings, like I mentioned before. And often people will gloss over actual differences that are happening in the conversation because they just want to be out of the conflict as soon as possible. This is kind of the go-to strategy for people who are just walking on eggshells or saying whatever they think the other person wants to hear. Oh dear. And that is a non-confrontational strategy. So the other type of strategy is a cooperative strategy, and that involves more direct approaches to conflict and can be seen as kind of aggressive or bold if you're a non-confrontational person having to deal with this type of person, but cooperative strategy is actually a very good thing. So it's direct, and its goal is to integrate and find solutions. So it's all about compromise and kind of trying to see things from the other person's perspective. Usually if you have a cooperative strategy or style, you are very keen to viewing conflict as a type of positive process of growth rather than a negative process to be avoided. Dude, this is bad. Okay, and then the third one is confrontational. You'll notice that in a confrontational style, this is also a direct strategy. So it is similar to cooperative just in that sense, where the person is not afraid of conflict, but instead of viewing conflict as kind of a collaborative and positive experience, the confrontational conflict haver is direct in the sense of kind of aggressive arguing. They are really insistent on being right, or are very afraid of being wrong in a certain sense. Oops, sorry, little chicken. And they often view conflict as a matter of winning or losing, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they really want to win. It might also just mean that they really don't want to lose for various reasons. But the person with a confrontational strategy likes to take control and advocate for their position in a listening sort of way, non-active listening sort of way. Of course, you want to advocate for your position either way, but you don't want to insist on it without considering the position of the other person. All right, so those are important to remember and to keep in mind. Maybe think about which one you are or which one you lean toward. Okay, so we're locking in. This is very important. Actually, this slide is, oh, there it is. There it is. That was interesting. Okay, so there are 5 different types of conflict that the textbook talks about. There is the pseudo-conflict, which is the most common type in my experience as a person who is married and has friends and has family members that I have conflict with. And it is a conflict that stems from a simple miscommunication or a lack of expectations, or I should say a difference in expectations and miscommunication. So this is like if I say, hey honey, can you go to the store to get some milk? And then she goes to Hobby Lobby and comes home with a bag of silk. That has never happened and is kind of a strange example, but I might get frustrated that I was waiting for her to come home so I could prepare a meal with the milk, and then when she comes home after so long and I'm expecting there to be milk so I can finally do what I was going to do, it is not there. So that might lead to a conflict, but really no one did anything wrong. It was just a miscommunication that happened between us. This is also happens a lot from different expectations. Like if you say, hey, I'll be home before too late tonight, and then by that you meant like 10 o'clock, but they thought you meant maybe 8 o'clock, and then they're expecting you home 2 hours before you get home, and that just leads to kind of an altercation. So there's also simple conflict, which is the second most common type. This is what people usually think of when they think of a conflict most of the time. This is, oh my goodness, this is conflict over ideas and definitions, perceptions, or goals. So if we have different presuppositions and beliefs, politically, theologically, anything like that, it's going to be one of these simple conflicts. And this is kind of, if you're the type of person who can, where did I just spawn? If you're the type of person who can have a dialogue about differences in ideas and opinions, then these are not too overwhelming and can actually be enjoyable depending on what you're talking about, but most people want to avoid even these. All right, and then you have ego conflicts, which are conflicts based on personal issues that attack self-esteem. So this is like if somebody is accusing you of something or is doing one of those evaluative, overgeneralized statements to somebody that's saying like, you are always like this, you're always like that. That can lead to a conflict where people try to defend themselves and to justify themselves and save their ego a little bit. There's serial arguments, which are argumentative episodes focused on the same issue at least twice. So this just means this comes up over and over again. This might happen if you have a fundamental disagreement with one of your friends and you just have to say, hey, we just don't talk about this. Like, we're cool, but we don't talk about this topic. And that's okay to say sometimes. Sometimes you just can't come to terms on something and you just don't revisit it with that person. And then irresolvable conflict, related to what I just said. It's a conflict that two parties agree can't be resolved. Usually it starts as a serial argument where it just is something that comes up over and over again and you never really make progress. And then it becomes quote unquote irresolvable when both parties say what I just said. I don't think we should talk about this anymore. Agree to disagree. That's the idea. You know, there's not really an attempt to continue. You don't really want to turn normal conflicts into irresolvable conflicts, because if you have too many of those, it can be a little bit difficult for the relationship. Okay, so here, what I want you to do now is I'm going to guide you through a class activity, and then I want you to do it on a piece of paper and pause this video while you do it. And this is what you are going to submit to me in a picture form or a screenshot form on Canvas. I'll make an assignment for it, and then you will get extra credit for this and it'll count as your attendance. So I had to put it further into the video to make sure people got there. So first I want you to get out a piece of paper. Any piece of paper, it can have lines, it can have not lines, and I want you to draw a visual representation of conflict. You can use a pen, you can use a pencil, you can use colors. It doesn't have to be that detailed. You're not going to be graded on your artistic abilities, but I want you to draw a visual representation of conflict. Think conflict is like blank. Think of somebody that you have conflict with and draw the first thing that comes to mind or that represents your experience in conflict with that person. And go ahead and pause the video and do that. And when you're done, you can unpause it. Okay, so I hope you've drawn your picture. That's going to come back into relevance later. I am looking forward to seeing your picture. It can be literally of anything, no pressure on that. Now I want you to look at some of these pictures, okay? So on the PowerPoint here, we have 5 pictures, and they are, what I'm telling you, are conflict metaphors. So essentially what a conflict metaphor is, and this is not from the textbook, this is my own content that I focused on in grad school and that I find very interesting. So a conflict metaphor is essentially a statement of what conflict is like that determines whether or not you have productive and positive conflicts or negative and harmful conflicts. So I might say conflict is like a war, and that might indicate to you that I have a fundamental belief that conflict is negative and also involves a winner and a loser and perhaps can be violent. I might say conflict is like being trapped in a hurricane. Or conflict is like a tug of war, or something like that. And again, these kind of have the connotation of winning and losing. and maybe there being a struggle for power or victory or something like that. So, oh, I thought that was the same spider. So what I want you to think about now, and you're going to put this on your piece of paper here in a minute, I want you to write down below your picture or above it, somewhere else on the paper where I can see it, 1 through 5, what do you think each of these pictures could mean about conflict? So the boxing gloves is 1, the people preparing for battle is 2, the people in the courtroom is 3, the people on the sea are 4, and the people gardening is 5. And what I want you to do is write what you think. If I said conflict is like this, and then I showed you this picture, what would I be saying conflict is like? What would the conflict involve? Is it a positive or a negative metaphor? Could it be both in a certain sense? So think about that. Pause this video. Write 1 through 5. How is this an image of conflict? Or if I said conflict is like this, what might I have in mind? What experiences? And then write that 1 through 5 on your paper, and then come back and unpause the video. Okay, I hope you paused the video and then unpaused it after doing that. So let me talk about this just briefly. So, a lot of times students, when they're talking about the boxing gloves, they point out that if I said conflict is like this picture of the boxing gloves, that has a connotation of 2 people who are in a altercation that is like me versus you type of thing. So that means if conflict is like a boxing match, then there's a winner and a loser, and it's very important that you be the winner. They also point out that they're doing the glove touching thing, which seems to imply that there's a level of respect. Maybe you kind of have rules in your friendship that are unspoken, or in your relationship that's like, hey, we can fight as long as it doesn't go too far, and no hard feelings. This is just part of the process. But it remains that there's a winner and a loser. The next one over of the people gearing up for battle, that one is also about fighting, but it seems like they are fighting side by side with one another, and that they are facing some kind of external threat. So even though it is a fight of me and you versus some other thing. So there is a connotation of teamwork, there's a connotation of working together, and I would say that this is a more positive metaphor as far as maintaining the collaboration in your relationship is concerned. The one in the middle of the guy on trial, people will talk about how if conflict is like being on trial, it often feels like in your conflict there is just a slew of accusations being hurled at you, and you kind of feel like you're on trial and you're constantly having to defend yourself or say whatever you need to say to get out of the conflict situation. Maybe you're unjustly being put on trial, but it often feels like you are kind of just trying to power through the accusation so you can come out on the other side. And then you have the bottom left, you have the sea. This is a metaphor about being trapped in a uncontrollable situation that is beyond you, whether it's being emotionally overwhelmed or being unable to figure out how to handle the conflict effectively because it's been going on for so long, or it's just too confusing. It's this idea of being trapped in a storm, and you kind of just have to weather it until you get out. And that's a negative metaphor because it kind of points to conflict as something that is dangerous, harmful, and maybe very emotionally difficult to deal with. And then you have, finally, the one in the bottom right. And this one is the most difficult because it's very unclear how this picture of 2 people gardening could refer to conflict. But what I would say is that it is a positive metaphor for conflict, where I could say conflict is like a garden. It's 2 people kind of getting their hands dirty and their knees muddy to try to work together and figure something out. And the people are coming together in this collaboration, and even though it's hard and it's hard work, they are ultimately working together and coming to a solution where beautiful things can come out of the dust, out of the ground, so to speak. So they're working together, it's hard, but it's ultimately productive and collaborative. So if I say conflict is like a garden, what I mean is I drew something like this. I don't know if you can see it very well, but I don't know if you can see it super well, but essentially it's a drawing of 2 people tending to a flower, and there's like light blooming out of it, and there's all this darkness like licking their backs and surrounding them. So there's this sense that there is like unpleasantness and heaviness and maybe a threateningness to the relationship on the outside of them that they're both dealing with, but ultimately they're cultivating something together and they're weathering that storm together. And it's not about me versus you, it's about we are dealing with life and the chaos and we're doing it together and we're on the same team. And so if you can go from shifting your thinking to conflict is like some negative thing to training yourself to think that conflict is like some positive thing and kind of intentionally develop a positive metaphor, it can actually really change how you deal with conflict. So what I want you to have on your piece of paper that you take a picture of and submit to me is the drawing that you initially drew. And then I want you to, 1 through 5, say, how do each of these images that I showed you before, these 5, represent conflict in your opinion, or like what stands out to you? And then number 6, I want you to write, what does this picture imply conflict is like? And that means your picture that you drew. What does your picture imply conflict is like? And what is the experience of conflict? Is it good or bad based on your picture, if you were to interpret it as a conflict metaphor? And then number 7, can you think of a better conflict metaphor image in general that would be healthier that you could maybe cultivate? Conflict is like what? What is an image of conflict that would have a more positive and collaborative and productive connotation for what conflict is and what the experience is about? Cool? That's what you're going to submit for extra credit and also for your attendance. Okay, so how should you manage conflict? This is PUGSS. It's an acronym from the textbook, and we're going to kind of go into the detail here in a sec. So PUGSS stands for describe your problem, achieve understanding, identify goals, brainstorm solutions, and select the best solution. So these are 5 different stages of conflict that you will, conflict management that you'll go to try to come to a productive solution for everybody who's involved. Also, sorry if I'm triggering anybody by killing these cows. I gotta eat to survive. I'm not gonna damage the population. I'm going to ethically relate to the cows as much as I can until I can start farming. And then just to make sure I'm being conscientious, I'll switch primarily to bread products here. All right. Excuse me, forgive me. Okay, so first, describe the problem. So this is the first thing you do when you're dealing with a conflict. You describe the other person's behavior rather than evaluating the person. This is like what we talked about earlier in the semester with using I statements, if you recall. It's about, not saying what you did was bad or you're always doing this thing. It's instead about recognizing that the other person themselves isn't the problem, or at least not making them feel like they're the problem, because that ends up backfiring every single time. It's rather about, talking about your experience. So self-disclosing your own emotions and your own feelings, and recognizing that you cannot have a productive conversation while blaming somebody else like that, because they're just going to become defensive and it's going to be bad. So you say, when this thing happens, I feel blank and what I need is this, instead of accusing the other person of something and then engaging in defensiveness or cultivating defensiveness by accident. So describe what happened, the behavior, rather than evaluating the person and making absolute judgment calls on them. Then, we already did this, so right. Instead of saying, you are always late, why are you so selfish? You would say something like, when you did not show up at the time you said you were going to, I felt like I was not being prioritized and I felt upset because of that. So that's a little bit more productive way to approach that. All right, then the U, P-U. The U stands for achieve mutual understanding. So that is, actively listening, trying to understand where the other person's coming from. You ask questions like, you're trying to make yourself be understood and then be understood. And you ask questions like, do you understand why I see this as a problem? And if they say, I don't get why you're making such a big deal out of this, or they say, I don't understand why you're so upset, then you know that understanding is not being achieved. So the goal here is to achieve understanding for both people using active and effective listening. You want to kind of ask if you're being understood and say like, okay, am I making sense? Do you understand where I'm coming from? And you have to be careful not to get mad at people if they seem like they're not listening to you. You know, if you accuse someone of like, oh, you're not even listening, then that can also lead to some defensiveness. And the reality is that you know, sometimes they're not listening, but sometimes we're just not explaining things well. So we should give them the benefit of the doubt and recognize that it's very difficult to understand where people are coming from sometimes, and we should be willing to try to explain things in different ways and be patient so they can understand where we're coming from. Because if they've never had an experience like the one that we're describing, it's going to take them a while to really get it, especially if they're, you know, not a super duper empathetic person. But even for empathetic people, that's hard. You know? Okay. So then, you know, if you get to understanding, we move to goals, which is the G, PUGSS. And if you can't get mutual understanding, you need to, you know, keep doing that, because you can't really have a collaborative goal setting conversation in a conflict unless you are being understood and are understanding where the other person is coming from. So the G stands for goals. Both of you should be able in the conflict to address the following questions. What is it that you need and want, and why is it important to you? You need to be able to say, here's what I need and want and why it's important to me. And then you need to talk about what common goals you both have. So you can kind of go from being understood and understanding the other person to saying, okay, I recognize what you need. You aren't feeling prioritized. You aren't feeling respected, whatever it is. We both, you know, want to feel loved and respected. We both want more time together. It's just, you know, not been working out for whatever reason. So, dude, this is a beautiful map. Oh my goodness. So, you know, those are the types of questions we need to be able to answer in that context. So, beyond that, we go to the first S in PUGS, which is understanding solutions, or brainstorming solutions. And we need to here generate a lot of different solutions. So this is where you don't insist on your own way, you don't insist on your own interpretation of events or your own outcome or your own kind of advice that you've come to. You have to brainstorm a lot of things and withhold judgment here. So you don't want to evaluate the different statements that are being said. You want to withhold all of those evaluations until a list of possible solutions is generated. So that means, you know, if someone says an idea that's bad, you don't say, oh my gosh, I can't believe you suggest that. You just say, okay, I don't know about that, let's keep trying. Because sometimes, I don't know if anyone else is this way, but I feel like I just need to get all my bad ideas out of the way sometimes before the good ideas start flowing. So the goal here is just to generate potential solutions. Even generating bad solutions is helpful because you can talk about why they're bad solutions, and that will give you some clarity on what actually needs to happen. You know, you can bounce back and forth off of other people's or off of one another's ideas, and the more solutions you generate, good or bad, effective or ineffective, the more likely you'll kind of come to a conclusion that is feasible and that meets the collective goals that you both have. So the most important part of this is just don't be quick to evaluate what the other person is saying and call it a dumb idea or accuse them of being selfish because what they suggested was unreasonable or something like that. Just calmly communicate why you don't agree that it's a good solution, and then use that as an opportunity to develop a more productive solution. And then finally, the last S also stands for solution, and this means find the best solution. So after all of this brainstorming, you evaluate each solution without evaluating the person who generated the solution. So how well does each solution meet with the identified goals? You want to, at this point, come to an agreement on what the best solution is. How does it meet each person's needs that they've expressed before? And is it going to, you know, in a collaborative and productive way, move you forward in the relationship and in the conflict experience? So, to recap, the PUGS acronym stands for describing the problem. That means, hey, I'm feeling when this thing happens, I feel this way, and we need to address this. And then achieving understanding, using active listening to make sure you are understood and that the other person is being understood, and be patient if you're not being understood, and just try to be calm. Don't make accusations. Try to give them the benefit of the doubt. Identify your shared goals. Excuse me. Identify your shared goals, and then brainstorm solutions and select the best solution. So that's what that is. I was going to go through this as well, but I'm not going to do that. So here's what I'm going to say. Yeah, we don't need to go through all that. So here's what I'm going to say. Thank you for watching this. I'm not going to hold you off for any longer. I do want to share one more thing, but it's totally extra and just going to be my own ramblings while I continue to play Minecraft. So feel free to totally leave right now, and I will not be offended. So there's this other thing in communication called some people call it the crazy cycle. And I think that this idea of the crazy cycle is really important to understand, because I have seen a lot of relationships go through what I'm calling the crazy cycle, and then they end up in these horrible spirals that they don't know what's wrong with them or what's happening in their relationship, and they end up having a lot of really bad issues or even breaking up because of this cycle. Dang it, I accidentally only made it so I have room for one wide door. I can't think and can't play Minecraft and do this at the same time, apparently. So anyway, the crazy cycle is essentially when you're in a relationship, and this can be friendship or romantic relationship, but especially a romantic relationship, you have this loop, okay? And I'm going to represent it with these blocks. So at the top of the loop, you have someone is feeling unloved. You know what? Here's what I'll do. I'll make some signs. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh, double no. Okay, so the crazy cycle. So it begins when somebody feels unloved, essentially. This is especially true in relationships. So if somebody is feeling unloved or unprioritized or tized or unpursued or unvalued, anything like that, they don't feel like they are being loved the way they deserve to be loved, they usually are going to act out of a place of hurt and woundedness, and then that is going to lead to them acting in a way that is disrespectful or aggressive or maybe naggy is how it might come off as. But essentially what that looks like is they are feeling threatened in the relationship, and so they are, acting out of this place of insecurity or self-consciousness a lot of the time, or worry about the relationship. And so they, feeling unloved, unprioritized, they kind of act out in disrespect and nagginess, not because they're, a bad person or they're being mean or something, just because they are concerned. And then when your partner is acting this way, you feel disrespected. You might feel unappreciated. You might feel like they don't like you. And that is a really hard place to be. You might feel like they are never pleased with you. And if you feel like your partner, doesn't respect you, like your partner doesn't really think highly of you, that they don't admire you, then that can kind of deflate somebody a lot. And then they withdraw, and they become demotivated and passive, and they therefore act in unloving ways. And then this feeds back into itself. So if somebody is feeling unloved, they act disrespectful, and then their partner feels disrespected and unappreciated, and that discourages them, so they withdraw, they get passive, they're not motivated in the relationship, so they're not doing loving things, and they become passive. Then I've built like this shrine. Then it is this perpetuating cycle forever, because as you can see, it just goes in circles and circles because the person feeling unloved constantly acts disrespectful and the person feeling disrespected constantly withdraws. The interesting thing about this cycle, though, is usually the person who's on the bottom here, the disrespected side, the one who's withdrawing into passivity, it is not as noticeable that they are contributing to the cycle because their role is a role of withdrawing and passivity. However, it's very noticeable when this person is contributing to the cycle because theirs is an active attempt to preserve the relationship. And so usually, most of the time, this is a generalization, but most of the time this person is the woman and this person is the man. And so the man becomes passive and the woman becomes quote unquote naggy or very intense. They're like, I want to talk about this right now. We need to deal with this. We need to talk about this. We need to handle this. And the man is just like, I can't deal with all this right now. And he kind of doesn't have the energy or the motivation to deal with it. And so usually the woman is the one who looks like she is at fault, but really the passivity of the man is heavily contributing to that situation. And so the only way to actually break that cycle, unfortunately, is to be the first person to, in humility, disengage from the cycle, to disengage from the cycle while it is still happening. So, while you are actively feeling disrespected, you need to be intentional and pursue your partner and show love. While you feel like you are actively being unloved, you need to be respectful and, show appreciation for your partner and try to honor them and, support them in whatever way you can. So, that's the lecture for today. I was hoping to get further. Apparently it's hard to do this and to teach at the same time. So, thank y'all for listening. If for whatever reason you enjoyed this, I can do this more or something. I don't know. Anyway, since I've never done this before, it's kind of interesting. Maybe it was unbearable, but now I'm just extending the video for no reason. So have a great rest of your day. I will see y'all on Thursday, and I hope that everybody is well. Please email me if you have any questions or need anything at all. Goodbye.